Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please turn off your mobile phones or switch them to a vibration mode. Thank you for your cooperation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The ceremony is about to begin. Please turn off your mobile phones or switch them to the vibration mode. Thank you for your cooperation. 各位来宾早安。为维护活动品质，请将您的手机调为震动或是静音。感谢您的配合。Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of National Chen Kung University, Dr. Hui Zhensu, and also Dr. Gru Harlan Brundtland, and the Associate Vice President of Academy Affairs, Dr. Yu Ming Wang. As they take their seats, please kindly give them your warmest applause. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin today's ceremony. Welcome to 2018 National Chen Kung University Honorary Doctorate Degree Conferral Ceremony for Dr. Gru Harlan Brundtland. We will start by first presenting a video introducing today's honoree, Dr. Gru Harlan Brundtland. Please watch the video.
Dr. Gru Harlan Brundtland was awarded the Tone Prize in 2014 for her lifetime achievement in sustainable development. Dr. Brundtland served as the first female Prime Minister of Norway for 10 years. In 1983, she was appointed by the United Nations to chair the World Commission on Environment and Development. And from 1998 to 2003, she was the Director General of the World Health Organization. Dr. Brundtland was born in Oslo in 1963. Dr. Brundtland graduated with a medical degree from the University of Oslo and acquired a master's degree in public health from Harvard University in 1965. She started her political career as Norwegian Minister for Environmental Affairs in 1974, then became Deputy Leader and Leader of the Labour Party. Beginning in 1981, she served as the first female Prime Minister of Norway. Dr. Brundtland is known as Mor Gru, the Mother of Norway. The Brundtland Report, Our Common Future, was published in 1987 to define sustainable development in a global context. Her vision still inspires us today.
I was very much aware that unless we find a response to these challenges that can combine environmental concerns with economic development and overcoming of poverty, there is no way. Because no country, no people will accept to stay in poverty because people in other parts of the world are feeling the consequences to the environment.
Dr. Brundtland is committed to promoting science education and career development for female researchers. She has donated 5 million NT dollars, a portion of her Tone Prize award, as a grant for the 2016 to 2018 Gru Brundtland Week of Women in Sustainable Development. NCKU is proud to be delegated as the official organizer.
Dr. Brundtland 自己的理想，想强调2个方面，一个是属于能够促进女性科学家，特别是女性科学家在永续发展、公共卫生领域的一种提升或者一些机会的链接所以我们尽量能够跨领域的，让比较属于开发中，尤其是在永续发展议题当中非常非常重要的或者 者是特别有强烈影响的一个区域来参加。所以我们希望这些科学家到了台湾以后，能够看到台湾各个不同的区域所展现出来的一些挑战。
Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. As the godmother of sustainable development, Dr. Brundtland looks forward to seeing future generations continue to learn and push for more changes.
I personally have done what I can to spread the message over the last 40 years. And now, I will continue as long as I'm alive, but I'm counting on you, the young people, to really run with the torch.
Now, we will welcome President Su, Dr. Brundtland, and the Associate Vice President of Academy Affairs, Dr. Wang, to come onto the stage. Please give a round of applause for them. Next, President Hui Su will give our opening remarks. Please welcome President Su.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on this auspicious occasion, I have the immense privilege to welcome the newest honorary doctoral degree recipient of the National Cheng Kung University, Madame Gro Harlem Brundtland. Having received a medical degree and later a Master of Public Health from the Harvard University in the 1960s, Madame Brundtland was heavily influenced by her father, who was a physician specialized in rehabilitation medicine. Also, a very prominent member of the nation's Labor Party, which made the young girl at age 7 also a member of the party's children's organization. Dr. Brundtland once recalls that there were always political and intellectual challenges at home, and she was encouraged to believe that women can achieve the same thing in the world as men. She later became the youngest ever and first female prime minister in Norway for 3 terms, having previously already served as a Minister of Environment and a Parliament member. Upon the request by the Secretary General, Dr. Brundtland established and chaired the World Commission on Environment and Development, where the term of sustainable development was first coined and defined as a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Today, the history-making watershed concept remains to challenge the global community whether we are able to derive a better balance of economic development, environmental integrity, and social equity. Through her remarkable career, health has been always a deeply personal, professional, and political dimension of the Brundtland's life. In 1998, She became the first female Director General of the United Nations World Health Organizations. Under her leadership, the WHO addressed effectively global pandemic such as AIDS, SARS, and even the health risk associated with the changing environment. That there is a very close connection between being a doctor and a politician. The doctor tries to prevent illnesses. They try to treat it if it comes. That's exactly the same as what you try to do as a politician with regard to society. She certainly has enriched the global health by taking the health into the halls of power and influence for more meaningfully than anyone in our time. Dr. Brundtland is married to Mr. Alan Brundtland, an expert on international relations and a foremost member of Norway's Conservative Party, the opposition to Labour's party. He said in an interview with Time, "My field is analysis of international relations. Her field is doing international relations. That makes for very good morning seminars." Dr. Brundtland was awarded with the first Town Prize in Sustainable Development in 2014 for her innovation, leadership, and implementation of sustainable development that laid out the scientific and technical challenges for the global community to achieve a better balance of economic development, environmental integrity, and social equity for the benefit of all humanity. She donated part of the Town Prize Awards to promote the issues of sustainable development and public health. The Global Learn Week of Women in Sustainable Development was made possible by her generosity aiming to enhance the involvement of younger women researchers from developing countries in the issues of sustainable development and public health, and to build a network to support system among female scientists from different countries. In addition, part of her donation went to the UN foundations to support the supplement of the stable energy to more than 262 medical institutes in Tanzania, a country in Eastern Africa, which resulted in a better hygiene system and made tremendous positive impact to nearly 2.3 million people. Over the past decades, Dr. Brundtland's path-taking endeavors has profoundly inspired hundreds and thousands of public health practitioners, environmental scientists, and to some extent, the politicians around the world to believe that there can always be a great calling and higher aim, regardless of the disciplines, if we bring passion and vision into each and every one of our professions. She has successfully exemplified how she envisioned her choices to become a doctor at 18 years old can achieve, and I quote, "A doctor is who wanted to heal and who wanted to change, not least to change the cause of suffering and injustice." She continues to practice and insists on evidence and on research-based decisions, which helped to build scientific attitude, credibility, and confidence within her career, across political practice, and across parties and countries. As we are all incentivized by her landmark accomplishments, we have also learned that once you are committed to lead change, the change shall come in due time. Today, joined by a panel of prominent world leaders And as Deputy Chair of the Elders, Dr. Brundtland continued to actively embrace her lifelong commitment to support peace building, help address major causes of human sufferings, and to promote the shared interests of all humanity. As our 87-year-old NCKU formally adopts the Sustainable Development Goals as a university guiding principle for the decade to come, we cannot be more proud to think of a way to celebrate by being associated with the godmother of sustainable development through the granting of this humble doctorate degree to, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Gro Harlem Brundtland. Thank you.
Thank you, President Su. Now, Dr. Yu-Ming Wang, our Associate Vice President of Academy Affairs, Deputy of the Vice President of Academy Affairs, will deliver the recommendation for our honoree, Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland.
Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, the first female Prime Minister of Norway, is currently serving as the Deputy Chair of the Elders and the Vice Chair of the United Nations Foundation Board of Directors. She received her medical degree from the University of Oslo in 1963 and obtained a Master of Public Health degree at Harvard University in 1965. Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland has held many significant international positions, including the chair of the World Commission of the Environment and Development from 1983 to 1987, during which time she drew international attention to the needs for the sustainable development. While serving as the Director General of the World Health Organization from 1998 to 2003, she focused on the promotion sustainable and fair health system in all countries of the world. Under her leadership, the WHO efficiently slowed the spread of many global infectious diseases, including AIDS, malaria, and SARS. Appointed as the United Nations Special Envoy on climate change in 2007, she assists the Secretary General in conducting the international negotiation among the government and the organization for a post-Kyoto Protocol climate change treaty. In recognition for her pioneers and the significant contribution to the global environment, healthy human rights, and sustainable development, I therefore recommend Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland without reservation to become a distinguished recipient of the honorary doctorate of medicine from the National Cheng Kung University. Minda Lai, Vice President from Academic Affairs, National Cheng Kung University, April 3rd, 2018.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. Now, President Su will accept the recommendation and announce the official response of the university.
On behalf of the National Cheng Kung University and in accordance with the degree conferral law, I sincerely accept the recommendation by the Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Minda Lai, to bestow upon Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland in honorary doctorate of medicine. Hui Zhenshu, President, National Cheng Kung University, April 3rd, 2018.
Next, President Su will turn the tassel for Dr. Brundtland and award the honorary doctorate degree certificate. Dr. Brundtland, please kindly come forward. Thank you, Dr. Buland and President Su. Now, let's have a short break. We will start in 5 minutes to continue our plenary lecture.
好，对不起各位，因为Dr. Boland 对这些温度啊调节比较敏感，所以呢，他想说他把他的袍子放下来。She's going to take off the gown because it's way too much heat and weight for her. So it's going to be just a few minutes for us all， 好不好？有2分钟，他就回来做他的演讲，这样。好，谢谢。
Now, Dr. Gru Holland Boatland will give her plenary lecture. We will have President Su chair this session. Please welcome President Su and Dr. Boatland again. Please kindly
So, girl, you have either options, either speak to the microphone or have the handheld microphone.
No, I don't want a hand.
Okay, so this is around, so you can adjust it. Okay, good.
You are the same height as me.
You are totally
We are,
How's
yeah.
it?
So
How's
that,
it?
this
Look
is
all right?
good, huh? Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Madam Grovewater.
Thank you. This is good.
Yeah, it looks fine to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Madam President, Vice President, Mr. Jesse Chern, this is, for me, that's his name. I'm not sure it's correctly said, but from the Tang Prize. Ladies and gentlemen, students and faculty, it is great to be back here today in Taiwan and also here, remembering the wonderful events in 2014 when the first Tang Prizes were awarded. I was deeply grateful to be receiving this great honor. One of the positive developments was the Tang Prize grants that we could use for each one of us to further our key causes. The Grow Brundtland Week was one of these initiatives that we have heard of now, inspired by my conviction that to promote women and their role in society is a crucial element of a sustainable world of prosperity, peace, and security. The world has fortunately, step by step, moved forward, inspired by my conviction, over my lifetime, to realize that human rights also need to be women's rights, and that empowerment of women is a prerequisite for sustainable development. I'm grateful for the excellent efforts also by the National Cheng Kung University and the quality of the process of assembling young women scientists who wish to contribute to the global knowledge base for pursuing sustainable development. The title of my speech today is about the critical need we all are facing for our world and our more than 190 different countries to be working together for our shared interests to safeguard our common future. Sustainable development, the concept we coined back in 1987, has nearly 30 years later, in 2015, led to a crucial global agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals. It has been a long journey, but it has successfully brought the world together behind key common goals. It is also an important part of my own life story and how I became personally involved, engaged and convinced already as a young environment minister of Norway in pursuing a pattern of development that could benefit all, protect our planet, and promote peace. In 2015 became a year of historic breakthrough as our leaders finally agreed on the Sustainable Development Goals in New York, and that was in September, and then in December that year on the global agreement on the climate in Paris. So 2015 fulfilled the hopes of so many and became the breakthrough year for a critical agenda for our world and our future, only less than a year after the first Tang Prizes. I had become greatly inspired at the UN in New York, having spoken at a session led by the French President Hollande at the historic meeting when world leaders signed up to the new Global Sustainable Development Goals. It was really uplifting for me to witness the passion and the determination only weeks before Paris shown by the leader of the host country, France. I am convinced, however, that we would not have seen the success of Paris without the hard work for years towards the Sustainable Development Goals. an initiative taken by the UN Secretary General after the breakdown in Copenhagen in 2009. This again inspired the result of Rio +20 in 2012. It all led to a broad global effort to agree on sustainable development goals for rich and poor countries alike. For the first time, a development agenda now fully integrates the environment and applies to all countries, not just to the developing world. And so does the Paris Agreement, finally. Sustainable energy for all, empowerment of women, addressing inequality and good governance, also within countries, are certainly concerns and obligations that also rich countries need to take seriously. After a hard-fought struggle, the goals did include, as goal number 13, a crucial, strong commitment by all countries seriously to address climate change. That is what was demonstrated and confirmed in Paris. It had taken a quarter-century of negotiations to reach this stage of common responsibility, based on national commitments and agreed principles and rules on common goals and aspirations, to be reporting and to be counted, and to increase the level of ambitions at regular intervals. The long journey of follow-up to the work of our Commission in 1987 has a broad range of efforts by so many countries, institutions, individuals, and leaders behind it. I will share with you some critical parts of that story. In 2015, we also celebrated the 70th anniversary of the United Nations. When the United Nations was established in 1945, I was 6 years old. The world was emerging from the horrors of the Second World War. In my country, Norway, we were reasserting and reestablishing democracy after 5 long years of Nazi occupation. By the time I was 10, my family was living in New York, and I was proud and keenly aware that a fellow Norwegian, Trygve Lie, had become the United Nations' first Secretary General. Little did I know then that I would have a long-time involvement with the United Nations. Over the past 35 years, I have had the honor and privilege to serve on various United Nations committees, as well as heading up one of its flagship agencies, the World Health Organization. However, today, more than ever, the relevance of the United Nations is also challenged. There have been profound shifts of power and wealth in the world since the UN was established. Of the 193 member states of the United Nations today, nearly 3/4 were not members in 1945. Its purpose now is greater than just trying to maintain peace and security among nations. It is also to help solve the economic, social, humanitarian, and environmental problems facing us. My first role serving the UN was in 1983, when the UN Secretary General invited me to establish and chair the World Commission on Environment and Development. Our commission considered the interwoven challenges of environmental degradation, poverty, and population growth. The Commission, best known for developing the broad political concept of sustainable development, published its report, Our Common Future, in April 1987. The Commission's groundbreaking and radical recommendations led to the Earth Summit, the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. The whole process of our work was from the outset geared towards a broad international learning process reaching out to all relevant parties, not only governments and the NGO community, but to universities and think tanks, research bodies, and not least to the whole business community. We knew we would be in this together, but that the future depended on unparalleled cooperation to succeed. In Rio '92, impressive results were already possible to be achieved. The Climate Convention, the Biodiversity Convention, and of course Agenda 21, describing the development needs of the coming century. 5 years later, we had the Kyoto Protocol on Climate, leading to seemingly endless rounds of negotiations, up to the historic meeting in Copenhagen in 2009. There it became clear that new ways of collaboration were of the essence after the serious breakdown between different groups of countries that dominated that important summit. However, at least one common goal was agreed. The world must not see a higher temperature rise than 2 degrees Celsius, an essential outcome of Copenhagen after all. Parallel to the climate focus, over the years, the UN system continued working on several critical issues for our common future. The Social Summit in Copenhagen in the 90s, in Cairo, the Conference on Population and Family Planning, in Beijing, the Conference on Women's Rights, just to mention 3 of maybe the most critical ones. At the millennium, our world leaders were able to agree on a number of crucial issues and launched the Millennium Development Goals. This was a key effort to follow up Agenda 21, but it turned out it was impossible to take into account the serious climate and environment dimension we were already facing. Also, the idea that a development program should address all countries, not just the developing world, was still unthinkable. We have come a long way since the publication of the report nearly 30 years ago. Indeed, great strides have been fought since the launch of the Millennium Development Goals in 2000. We have dramatically reduced the proportion of people living in extreme poverty. More people have access to safe drinking water. Fewer children are dying in infancy. Fewer mothers die due to giving birth to new generations. However, even a quick glance will show that while some in the world are experiencing unprecedented levels of prosperity, the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. Environmental degradation continues, and the effects of climate change have begun to threaten the world's most vulnerable populations and ecosystems. This is why the new Sustainable Development Goals will be crucial in continuing the momentum to eradicate extreme poverty by 2030 and to address a number of critical economic, social, and environmental issues, including climate change. Over the last 28 years, since the launch of our common future, I have often been asked to confirm that so little is being done, that the challenges are too large to tackle, basically being confronted with the issue of giving up. Yes, it has taken too much time. Yes, the pace of change has often been devastatingly slow. However, I have always tried to remain focused on the urgent goals and counting even small gains in wisdom and commitment. So today, I believe it is time to also turn it all around. We should celebrate while reminding people that looked at historically, it may not it may not be so surprising that close to 200 countries with widely varying stages of development, culture, and history have needed some time to overcome such large differences in background and perspective. When I was asked to chair the World Commission on Environment and Development in 1983, I was leader of the opposition and had my hands more than full with my responsibilities on the Norwegian political scene. The Secretary General put upon me a heavy feeling of responsibility when he explained, "You are the only environment minister to have become Prime Minister." I just could not decline. Years later, now for the third time Prime Minister, during question hour in the Norwegian Parliament, I became exasperated. After a long round of questions from an opposition leader who insisted I must tell him which single factor was the really essential one, I concluded, everything is linked to everything else. I was immediately attacked and criticized by the press for being so unclear and so evasive. Interestingly, as awareness and global debates have increased, the understanding of the multiple and complex challenges we are facing, my remarks back then are now often referred to and quoted as an example of the deepest wisdom. In 2015, after nearly 3 decades, countries of the world have in fact been able to overcome often very deep differences of opinion and priorities. These deep divisions over the new threats to the global environment came fully to the fore already in Stockholm, more than 40 years ago at the first major UN conference on the environment. Indira Gandhi, the most forceful voice from the developing nations then, said the famous words, "Poverty is the greatest polluter." When I was appointed a decade later to lead what was later to be called the Brundtland Commission, I was profoundly aware that there was no alternative road ahead but to confront the two challenges, environment and development, in an integrated manner. This is why the Commission also was named by us the way it is. Clearly, a key concern for human development must be eradication of abject poverty and meeting the needs and rights of every human being for dignity, real choices, and a decent life. On the Commission I put together with more than half of the members coming from the developing world, something I insisted on and that had not happened in global context before. We analyzed these basic links as well as raised the new dimension of intergenerational responsibility. Never before had humanity been faced with having to extend their moral responsibility, concern, and obligations to all future generations, not just the ones living now. In our report, we called for radical change and transformation. We pointed at the need for equitable growth, one that is forceful and at the same time socially and environmentally sustainable. Crucially, I believe, it was that we did not ask for zero growth. There was something before us called the Club of Rome that called for zero growth, an impossible concept. What really matters is the quality of growth, both in terms of promoting growth that benefits the poor, but also in terms of reducing the impact on the environment. We address the dangerous trends towards climate change and global warming as a major challenge to the international community and to our common future. This was in fact dramatic enough for the world to be able to agree only 5 years later in Rio on the Climate Convention. The type of policy changes that are needed enter directly into the core of our development patterns and the use of energy. The fact is that many countries have been much too reluctant to commit to change, especially the largest emitters of greenhouse gases. Over the last 20-25 years, the reality that the effects of climate change is so much harder hitting poor people has increasingly become a key part of the discussion. Ecosystem losses due to climate change are constraining livelihood opportunities, especially for poor people. Growth patterns, both in Africa and China, still see the poor falling further behind. Many leaders now realize this can also be a source of social instability. Poor countries and emerging economies are already responsible for 2/3 of global emissions, a proportion that will increase year by year. So we all need to recognize that the drivers of that challenge include unsustainable lifestyles, production and consumption patterns, and the impact of population growth. As the global population grows from over 7 billion to 9 billion in 2040, with the emergence of 3 billion new middle-class consumers over the next 20 years, the demand for resources will rise exponentially. By 2030, the world will need at least 50% more water, 45% more food and energy, and 30% more water. It has now become clear that how closely linked climate change is with the Sustainable Development Challenge. Negative effects through climate change are illustrated by their impact on food security, on water scarcity, poverty and livelihoods, health and the well-being of oceans and other ecosystems. It gives me new hope today that there is a greater appreciation and concern about the increasing gaps within and between countries. To bring all countries and populations into an era of sustainable development and progress while protecting planet Earth, only a broad and consistent approach to overcome poverty and secure dignity, human rights, health and education for all is a viable and acceptable alternative. We have seen considerable progress in the Human Development Index in countries across the world. However, it will not be desirable or sustainable if these improved averages are accompanied by rising inequalities in income and unsustainable patterns of consumption. A recent report from Oxfam reminds us of the dimension of this drama. The richest 1% of us is now as wealthy as the remaining 99%. Terrible, shocking numbers. I believe we now need to put inequality at the heart of the agenda. Inequality is a barrier to human development in the first place, and greater equity is a condition for reaching the goal of eradication of abject poverty and deprivation. So investing in people's capacities, capabilities, women as well as men, through health, education, job creation, and other social services, must be an integral part of sustainable development. We can no longer assume that our collective actions will not trigger tipping points as environmental thresholds are breached, risking irreversible damage to both ecosystems and human communities. We all need to recognize that the drivers of that challenge include unsustainable lifestyles, production and consumption patterns, and the impact of population growth. As the global population grows, as I mentioned, there will be all of these added water and food and energy needs that I mentioned. So our panel strongly emphasized a critical point for our common future, the need to always measure and to price what matters. The marketplace has to reflect the full ecological and human costs of economic decisions and establish price signals that make transparent the consequences of both action and inaction. So we spoke about this yesterday at the Academia Sinica. Pollution, including carbon emissions, can no longer be free. Subsidies should be made transparent and phase out for fossil fuels by 2020, and we must make new ways to measure development beyond the GDP. Ironically, some of these words that a panel in front of Rio 2012 we made are word-for-word recommendations we made already in 1987 in the Brundtland report. Also then we pointed to the need for science to allow for a more informed and integrated decision-making. This is essential for decision makers to share the basic knowledge upon which to act. Most countries have by now experienced the dramatic changes in their own environment and are finally opting for cooperation instead of conflict and denial. It has become clear how closely linked climate change is with the Sustainable Development Challenge. Negative effects are illustrated by their impacts, and we all know now that water, food, and energy are all essential components as we promote sustainable development. They clearly also have a human rights perspective and are basic for health and abating poverty. And women are now increasingly being acknowledged as a vital force for growth and for sustainable development. Countries and companies with higher levels of gender equality have faster growth and better performance. We have the knowledge, the data, and the experience to prove that this is the case, and that those who remain stuck in patriarchal patterns of economic life will lose, and lose badly. Leadership, first and foremost among key global players, is of the essence. And I think we all know, certainly we know in Norway and in Taiwan, nothing moves fast enough or strongly enough if the USA is not one of the driving forces. It is also true very little happens of any consequence if China, India, and other important emerging economies do not engage for results. Fortunately, there are several good signs of large and emerging economies like China's taking important action to promote public health, a cleaner use of energy, and efforts to reduce dangerous emission. Note, when US and China, together responsible for half of global emissions, announced their commitment to take action and be part of the global solution. It did make it much less attractive also for reluctant countries to choose to line up behind one or both of those two major players as an excuse for their own inaction. Now, I think we all know that financing will be a critical issue. Limited public funds must be used strategically as incentives to unlock greater private investment flows, share risks, and expand access to the building blocks of prosperity, including modern energy services. And governments are taking action. Many are preparing for pricing carbon. Together they represent almost half of the global warming types of emissions. This means taking advantage of the vast potential that lies in maximization of resource productivity, especially with respect to energy and to water, and reducing waste. It means investing in sustainable technologies that will create jobs and support the poor, improve health and education, and build more resilient and equitable societies. And clearly, the private sector must fully engage and be fully responsible. The traditional separation between the public and the private sector is becoming increasingly irrelevant as our societies realize how interdependent we all are in a world with mounting common challenges and threats. Not just the public and the voluntary sectors, but also the business community must be socially and globally responsible. But business now needs, and they call for, much more government action to inspire innovation and solutions to reach a sustainable world. I have seen over all those 30 to 40 years how the business community was only pointing to governments, not willing to do anything themselves. That has changed. This also means we must urgently turn around the widespread and paradoxical policies still rampant across the world. Subsidies for fossil fuels, you don't have them here, do you? Well, maybe you do. That give additional incentives for their use. A policy that goes in the opposite direction of what we need. In fact, annual subsidies for established fossil fuels are estimated to cost about $500 billion, depending on the oil price. India is today using 14% of its federal budget for subsidies of gasoline prices, $43 billion. These are resources which could be channeled to clean, low-cost, sustainable energy technologies, as well as to social programs to benefit the poor. It is hard to believe that 16 years into the 21st century, exposure to indoor air pollution from the use of wood, dung, and coal for cooking and home heating is still one of the world's biggest public health problems. Yet 2.7 billion people still use these fuels, and more than 1 billion have no access to electricity. Globally, the good news is that the production and deployment of renewable energy is gaining much speed. Asia's energy needs will double over the next 20 years. This certainly illustrates the fundamental need to decouple this new era of growth from growth in CO2 emissions, while ensuring universal access to sustainable energy. Many governments are, as I said, preparing for pricing carbon, and together that means more than around half of the emissions. And also business has increasingly become aware that carbon pricing is the most efficient and most cost-effective means of reducing emissions, leading the business community to voice their support for carbon pricing. I think we all understand that partnerships will be crucial to deal with the dangers of climate change and to promote a green economy and unsustainable development. No, sorry, to avoid unsustainable development. So, in closing, and thank you all for listening, and thank you for the great honor, Madam President, of awarding me the honorary degree today. I believe we are all in this together as individuals and representatives of civil society. This scenario, this awareness that we have today, was certainly not there when I go back more than 30 years to some of my first meetings at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. I had been invited as speaker, the only woman except for Simone Veil from France. The title of my speech in 1979 was Quality of Life in the 1980s. I spoke about equality, the need to protect the environment, empowerment of women. Only after the turn of the century could we see a growing awareness among business leaders that they too are part of the equation. All I heard for years and years in Davos was this response. These are the responsibilities for governments and the public sector. We in the business community have only one goal and one responsibility, our financial bottom line. The scene has changed. All serious business leaders are now on board, realizing they too are part of the solution for a future that is prosperous, safe, and secure. So I remain optimistic. Advances in science have given us a better understanding of climate and ecosystem risks. Billions of people, even in developing countries, are socially connected by technologies that have shrunk the world and expanded the notion of a global neighborhood. So I again say, as long as we live on the same planet, there is no alternative path for us ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Buland. Now we welcome President Su to chair the Q&A session.
This is actually not typical for a doctoral lecture on the acceptance that we have Q&A session. As you can see, there are many young generation here, as well as our 5 women scientists that receive our award this year. They're sitting right here. You can identify them. So I wonder if you kindly maybe just take a few questions on the audience.
Absolutely.
And, okay, so we really have just a very limited amount of time, and the floor is open now for any of you. If you have any questions, inquiries, comments, curiosities about Madame Buland's lifelong endeavor. Anyone? I'm just going to have time. Yes, good. Okay, it's very young, probably 16 years old.
Hello, Madam. My name is Joanna and from Shenkong Girls High School. What I want to ask is that what would be the most difficult part and the most critical problem when facing an embedded habit in a society while changing and empowering a woman? Thank you.
Speaking it slowly.
I'm sorry?
She said something about what will be the most difficult
Part of changing the embedded habit in society for empowering women.
Oh my goodness! How do you best empower women when you have a lot of problems inside society? Yeah. How do you overcome? Well, when I think of the experience in my country, clearly, and I watched a film that was made just recently. There were clips from old, films taken by the Norwegian TV system. When I became Prime Minister in 1981, somebody went out on the streets and asked, what do you think about the new Prime Minister? We have a woman Prime Minister, And there were several older men above 50, 60, who answered, oh, I think a man needs to be Prime Minister. And then there were a couple of young and middle-aged women who who said, oh, it's about time, you know. But you know, when I saw the pictures of these men in their 50s who made that response, I believe a man needs to be prime minister. Nobody in my country would dare even to think in those terms now. So this was 81, we are 37 years later now. And the way people think in my country have changed. But they have not changed overnight. It has taken time, taken decades, as people have grown up seeing, not, you know, I was around as a prime minister or the opposition leader for a total of nearly 20 years. Then we had several men prime ministers, 3 or 4 in fact. Then in 2013, a new woman became prime minister in Norway. And I remember telling my mother when I was a young politician and she saw me struggling with male, you know, negative attention, oh, Gro, why do you do all this work? You know, why do you take all this criticism? Isn't it terrible and isn't it very unfair? And I told my mother, no, I have to do all these things because as society changes, attitudes have to change. I have to take all this trouble, but next time a woman becomes prime minister in Norway, it will be different. I said that, you know, in the early 80s, end of the 70s, early 80s. Now I have the proof that I was right. Nobody nobody questions the present conservative prime minister who is a woman, because society is already changed. People have new attitudes. Women and men behave in different ways, and the young people take it for granted. So there is hope, but you need to be pushing for the change. Women have to speak up, and the men have to listen and realize that they are in this with the women they love or the daughters they have given birth to. Yeah?
Thank you, Madam.
Okay, a comment from the men. There's one. Okay, in the very back, and then we'll come back. Yeah, there. Right.
There was somebody behind there, yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah.
From the boys' high school.
I'm Cui Jiawei, from a university student studying law, and first I want to thank you for a very good speech, and it inspired me a lot. And second, I want to ask a question about common questions. And I want to continue the last questions, is that nowadays, since the society has changed, but the women still face a lot of challenges. And the biggest one is that how can women manage their personal life and family and their academy or political life or achievements at the same time? And that is my questions. How can you at the same time doing a lot of prominent achievements and as well as managing your own life and your own family?
You know, before I became prime minister, of course, I had been a young environment minister and a deputy leader of the Labour Party for many years. And during that time, and all through my time as prime minister, on our program, on my conviction and on the program of the party was changing family patterns and changing family policy to benefit equality, to benefit women's rights and the children's rights. So we were establishing pregnancy leave, which when I had my children, that pregnancy leave was 12 weeks. When my daughter had her first pregnancy, it had become 18 weeks. We had pushed it forward. And when my granddaughter had her child recently, it was 1 year because we changed this during the 80s and 90s and also included parental leave reserved for the father. So it was no longer a choice that, you know, the father could, if he wanted to, take a number of weeks. In the Norwegian system today, if the family does not let the father take part of the parental leave, then they lose that leave period. So within the year now, the father has to take 14 weeks. He can take more, but he has to take at least 14 of the 48 or 52 weeks. You know, what does this lead to? It leads to, if you are a business leader and you are going to hire a young person, it used to be 50 years ago, if you even think about hiring a young woman, you have to think, oh, that woman may next year be pregnant. So I take the man. Now, when you see a young man or young woman, you can think, oh, that man may be a father and be away for 14 weeks, you know. So you level out those challenges in this way. Secondly, you need to have quality childcare for both parents to be able to have a family and a working life. There has to be a safe and good place for children from 1 year onwards. This we have today. It has taken years, but every child at 1 year has the right to childcare in a nursery school for children from 1 year. So you have to make these changes in society. Unless you make those changes, it's not only attitudes, but also reality of the choices that people have. If public policy has not made this possible, then, you know, we will not have equality and not have a progressive, productive society. Yeah.
I think we are quite hopeful to have a young, loyal male student asking this type of questions. So,
and of course, we did use law. We did use policy decisions, law changing to make this happen. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So there comes from India, our women scientist is here, right? Okay.
This is one of our awardees, yeah? Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for the inspiring speech. You are a medical doctor, and I want to know that when and how you developed interest in the public health.
How
and when you developed interest in the public health.
Oh, this age, yeah? No, because I told you, you know, I had a doctor, or I think maybe you told, a doctor father and a mother that had very strong values and convictions. They were both social democrats and members of the Labour Party. My father was both a politician and a doctor. And so early on, I started believing that I should become a doctor because then I can help change society in a better direction to create more justice and more rights for all people and to improve society by applying the knowledge of health. You know, it was my way of thinking already when I was maybe 8 or 10 years old. And then that made me seek medical school in Oslo and then seek directly into Harvard School of Public Health when I had finished my medical degree. Yeah.
Very much. I think we're going to have the last one, preferably from Nanyi-zhong. Good, okay. That's best boys' high school in the country. 好，南一中的来，请。
Hello, I'm Nemo from Tainan First Senior High School, and what I would like to ask is what motivates you in continuing to advocate in the issue of global climate change, because as we know, there are still many people that are skeptical of this idea of climate change, and what I want to ask is that does this make you kind of like depressed and sort of frustrated that so many people still don't believe in the actual idea of climate change actually happening?
Yeah. You know what? Because I have seen over the years that there are fewer people that question the reality of climate change now than even 5 years ago. So all those of us who have been advocating have been doing the research and the science to show what is happening and to spread the realities. We are part of the reason why more people today, also because they can see it now, you know, on the ground, until about, I mean, we have known for sure this problem for 40 years. But the scientific evidence has grown and grown, and I think people who 10 years ago dared to question the reality of this, they were really, most of them, part of a sometimes lobby-based campaign coming from the coal industry to place fake news, you know, into the arena. And they are still doing it to a certain extent, but they are more easily now understood. You know, you more know that where they come from. Like we did when I started WHO, I said, tobacco should no longer be advertised, glamorized, or subsidized. And the World Health Assembly audience stood up and applauded, because there had been so much resistance in the tobacco industry, effectively using economic strength to push anyone who dared to talk about the danger of cancer from tobacco. They were lying in the UN Congress, all the CEOs of the tobacco companies. You know, you had some of the same thing from the coal industry now in later years. But look, they have silenced down. You know, the foreign minister of the US, Rex Tillerson, who left 2 days ago because he had become too wise, I think. He was the leader of Exxon, the big oil and coal company, oil company. Until about 5 years ago, he was one of those who kept financing and supporting the counter-evidence, so-called, the false spreading of, you know, fooling people. But he understood some years ago, maybe 5, 7 years ago, this is no longer the right way. So he changed and became one of the progressive business leaders that said, look, this is it. We have to be part of the solution. Yeah. So even his life and his change illustrates how at one point the best people, at least within those industries, realized they have to be working with us, all of us, in partnership to find the solutions, not stand against history. So the problems you are asking about are less now than they were even 5 years ago. The world has understood, and most people have understood, although there will always be some that are more foolish than others and who are in the back of the line. Yeah.
in the interest of time, we probably have to close out the session for the moment. But before we do that, could I please invite you all to have another round of standing applause to thank Madam Rowland. Inspiration and the work. I believe it's not only for this generations, but also for many to come. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. And also, I'm going to ask you to do that. I believe all the youngsters would love to have a photo to memorize today's event with you. And the easiest way to do that is have you going back to the seat.
There, yes.
And we will take the photo from here. 然后我们会给一中、女中还有圣公的同学们都寄这张照片，好吗 ？OK， 所以你们先坐下来，我请 Dr. Grove 回来坐下。那我们 take 这张 photo， 那之后呢，我们再请我们的院长们到台前来，我们在这里再拍一张。好 ，OK，then I have to be fast。
Thank you, Dr. Rowland and President Su. Today, President Su brought a gift for Dr. Rowland. Let's welcome President Su and Dr. Rowland. We will now invite the distinguished guests of the first row to come on stage for a group photo. 里程. This brings us to the end of this conferral ceremony. We thank you all for joining us in celebrating this joyous and memorable occasion. Best wishes for your health and prosperity. Thank you and goodbye. Now, we will begin our symposium session. Let's invite Dr. In Ko and Dr. Xiaowen Wang to preside the following session. Now we will begin our symposium session. Let's invite Dr. In Ko and Dr. Xiaowen Wang to preside the following session.我们邀请圣公女中的同学一起上台合影。 请南一中的同学先预备好，等一下我们拍照可以比较顺利进行。请南一中的同学到舞台的右侧预备。请南一中的同学小心旁边的灯座。
请男女的同学尽快回到座位。
可以吗？
啊，老师会站在这边 chair 吗？
我们会下去。
好。
Hello, everyone. Hi, it's nice to see you. Yeah, it's our great honor to host this section. I am the chairwoman. Yeah, I am the chairperson. I'm Professor Ko from the School of Nursing, National Cheng Kung University, and my another co-chair is.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Xiaowen Wang. And I'm from the Department of Hydraulic and Ocean Engineering. And it's my great honor to be here with you in this session and co-chairing this session with Professor Guo. And well, my background is engineering field, but I have been focusing a lot on the sustainable development, environmental issues for years. So I'm very looking forward to interacting with you in this morning and the day to come.
Yeah, and because time issue, I will, the speaker order has been changed a little bit. So today I would like to introduce the first presenter, Dr. Chen, Yijin Chen. Yeah, she is the assistant professor of Department of Life Science in NCKU, and her topic is going to introduce the shifting nature and the journey toward a sustainable future. Let's welcome her.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. I see many young students here. I'm very happy. And particularly the big head were all gone, so I feel so relieved now. Okay, I'm Yijin Chen, and so it's a great honor for me to be here to share with you my own journey of thinking about the sustainable future. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. 10 years ago, when I was a young lady, I had an extraordinary experience. I had the privilege to stay in the astonishing tropical mountain for several months, climbing up and down and try to answer a research question that nobody knows before my research. So this is Mountain Kinabalu in the northern tip of Borneo. Do any of you know where is Borneo? Yes, of course. That's a big island, a fantastic island. So this mountain, high above about 4,000 meters high in the summit area, that's actually here. Barely no vegetation, and you can see from above, you can see the foothill. It's quite exposure. So what can you find in this area? But actually, when you light up a tea lamp, you can see tiny creatures here come all the way through the dark to my light trap. They are all moths. They are moths, all kind of moths, all kind of color, all kind of shape. They all come to my light trap. And I say, tea lamp is this. What actually is that? Tea lamp. I guess many of you don't even heard about this, right? This is a very old-fashioned light. And I use this because I want to repeat a transect survey first conducted here in 1965. So that's 42 years before my research. And the reason I want to do that is I want to compare whether the tropical species here, they already move up here in responding to climate change. So I need to control everything similar, the same, exactly the same to the previous survey, and the only difference is the climate. And this area has been experienced warming about 0.7 degree, so that's the only difference. And Mountain Kinabalu is a wonderful place to do this research because it was set as a national park since 1965. So the habitat is well preserved, and you can see that the vegetation is largely similar from the first survey to my resurvey. And after conducting the very demanding field work and also a lot of lab work to do the sorting and then data analysis, I can still remember the moment when I pressed enter to see the results. And the result is quite straightforward and surprising because we found that the average elevation of those moss species in this tropical mountain have moved uphill for the past 42 years. And because the only thing difference is the climate, so we think this is very likely very important evidence to show that the tropical species are moving uphill in responding to climate change. And this is actually the first empirical evidence showing that the tropical species are responding. But go back to the past two decades, you can actually see a lot of evidence showing that species are changing their distribution. So for example, this is the case from the UK. And you can see that all kinds of taxa, from the insect, the reptile, the mammals, and the bird, even fish, they are moving toward the north. So that's a cooler place, so that species can respond to the warmer or elevated temperature. Or the plant species in the Alps, they are all moving uphill in responding to the warming climate. And not only from the terrestrial system, in the marine, we also see that the marine species are moving, seems to be everywhere, but actually they are checking the climate. Okay, so from a recent comprehensive review done by our college and me, that we found that there are actually evidence of biodiversity redistribution all over the world in responding to climate warming. So you can see that from the marine system to the terrestrial ecosystem, from the hot tropical area or to the Arctic area. So all the species are changing their distribution. And what does that mean? Is that only matter to ecologists, or that's only something relevant to ecosystem? But from this review, we found that species on the move, meaning that species are changing their distribution, they're actually affecting not only the ecosystem health, but also the human well-being, and also affect the climate itself. So I'm going to show an innovation that I think that would be much easier for you to understand this story. Should I do that by myself, or you're going to help me? Oops. Wake up. Sorry about this. Okay, it goes quite quick, right? So I briefly explain a two-case study again. Why we say that species on the move are going to change all the ecosystem and also human well-being and also climate itself. So let's look at the case of greening of the Arctic. And we know that the temperature in the Arctic area has been increased twice compared to the global average. And this this temperature increase actually involve not only the albedo change and also the evapotranspiration in this area. So this climate change allow many plant species to clone into this area, including many grass species and many shrub species. So this kind of plant community change are going to enable many animals to also clone this newly available habitat. So these new coming species are going to exclude many original species living in this area. So they're going to also have trophic effect. But from this natural system effect, this also affect the indigenous community because their harvesting and hunting are following the natural reason, but this reason not change. So these are going to challenge the way we manage this area. And another case could be the mosquito as a vector of disease because the temperature and the rainfall are changing. So the suitable area for this disease transmission are changing. So these diseases are expanding and they may be active for longer. So millions of people are newly at risk thinking about dengue fever. I think you are familiar with this case. So these are going to have huge economic and social effect. So this will also challenge our detecting system and also resource reallocation ability. So, but if we look at the global agreement, we are still talking about something that we're going to limit warming to this extent. It's actually 3 to 4 times the warming we already experience. And another part is the key international agreement for focusing on social and economic implication of emissions. And in fact, the shifting natural ecosystem have not yet been appropriately considered. So if you agree that the shifting nature are going to affect the 3 different sectors, and if they are not considered, how can we achieve the sustainable development goal from the UN? So let's have a closer look of what exactly is the sustainable development goal in the UN. There are several that will be highly relevant to species on the move. So for example, no hunger, good health, or climate action, life below water, or life on land. So let's have a closer look to what exactly inside this sustainable development goal. So for zero hunger, they are saying that by 2030, we want to double the agricultural productivity. We want to ensure the food production. But the suitable climate for those crop species are changing. And even we can manage the crop, but thinking about the pollinators, they are changing their distribution too. And it's very difficult to handle. And thinking about, so for the good health, by 2030, they are aimed to end the epidemics of many diseases. And they are associated with the animal vectors. And they are all changing their distribution. So thinking about life below water, they're talking about by 2020, we want to sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystems. And thinking about fish, they are important source of protein. And thinking about the coral, they are important habitat for many species, but they are all changing their distribution. And they're also talking about conserve at least 10% of the coastal and the marine areas. But these are actually geographically fixed conservation areas. But species are changing their distribution. So how can we manage to preserve these species by doing so? So this will be quite similar for life on land. So we actually face many challenges. We need to think about managing relocation. We need to think about adaptive management, and we need cross-border initiatives, because life on Earth doesn't recognize the boundary of the country, right? And we need to manage the movement. We need to understand the underlying processes. We need to monitor, we need more monitoring program, and we need to incorporate species on the move into assessment. And importantly, we need to communicate with the public and the policymakers. So that's very important that we are here today. So the outlook is species on the move means changing the distribution should be mainstream into local, regional, and global assessment. So only by doing so, we can hope to ensure that the future target can be achieved, no matter that's local or global goal. So we need to prepare for a world of universal social and ecological change. So that's all my talk, and I would like to thank to all my colleagues travel all over the way to Australia, and we hold a very good conference and workshop so that we can have the comprehensive review, and then we can say something about how species on the move may affect our sustainable future and deliver a very important message to policymakers. So that's my talk. Thank you very much. A question now or later?
Do all the presentation and then to collect your answer and your question, and then we do the panel discussion afterward.
So thank you, Professor Chen, for her very inspiring talk by showing the species on the move. So next, let's welcome another speaker, who is Professor Chen, Professor Chen Yuwen, and she's with the Department of Pharmacology, and she's going to share the association between the antidepressant under the diabetes. So please give big applause, and let's welcome Professor Chen.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is my pleasure to be here to share my research with you guys. So my research presentation I'm going to present here is about the association of antidepressant use and diabetes. Long-term use of antidepressant is associated with the risk of diabetes, and the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor inhibits insulin secretion and action in the pancreas cells. So in our study, we want to demonstrate whether fluoxetine, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, impairs insulin secretions. So in order to study the effects of fluoxetine on insulin secretions, mouse mean-6 beta cells was used as in vitro model in this study. As you can see here, the fluoxetine decreases the glucose stimulates insulin secretion. However, fluoxetine have not effects on cell proliferation and cell viability. Next, we want to study the underlying mechanism by which fluoxetine impairs insulin secretion. As we know, cell adhesion is important for insulin secretion. So, also, the E-carryotype is important and required for insulin secretion. Study shows RNAi-mediated silencing or E-carryotype in mean-6 cell and isolate islands decrease the glucose insulin secretes. Glucose stimulates insulin secretion. So, we are interested to study whether fluoxetine impairs cell-cell adhesion. So as you can see here, the fluoxetine alters the cell morphologies and also reduce the cell-cell adhesion in mean-6 cells. As we know, cell-cell adhesion is important for insulin secretion, and adhesion junctions is the most important structural for maintains the cell-cell adhesion. E-cadherin is the most important molecule for adhesion junction. So we further want to study whether fluoxetine impairs the E-cadherin distribution. So as you can see here, in the control cells, the E-cadherin were fully expressed at cell junctions. However, in fluoxetine treating cells, E-cadherin was decreased at cell junctions. The fluorescence staining also shows the fluoxetine-induced accumulation of E-cadherin in cytosol. Our 3D animation also shows the fluoxetine treatment decreased the expression of E-cadherin at cell junction. So next, our result shows the fluoxetine increase the accumulation of E-cadherin expression in cytosol. We further want to identify where the E-cadherin accumulates in cytosol. So we use the carnation is a ER marker, and Golgi A5 is a Golgi markers. As shown in results, in control cells, E-cadherin is not localized with the carnation. However, in the fluoxetine treatments, the E-cadherin is co-localized with the carnation. So our results suggest the fluoxetine-induced E-cadherin accumulates in the Golgi, not in ER. Our result shows the fluoxetine-induced accumulation of E-cadherin expression in cytosol, mainly localized in Golgis. So we want to study whether the fluoxetine affects the cell surface expression of E-cadherin. As you can see here, the fluoxetine decrease the surface expression of E-cadherin in MIN6 cells. Our result indicates fluoxetine increase the accumulation of E-cadherin expression in cytosol, and also decrease the cell surface expression of E-cadherin. So our hypothesis, the underlying mechanism by which the fluoxetine decreased the cell surface expression of E-cadherin is due to mullin synthesis E-cadherin is blocked for cell surface transport, or due to increased endocytosis of E-cadherin. EEA1 is an early endosome marker. So our result shown here is in the fluoxetine treating cells, fluoxetine increase the endocytosis of E-cadherin. So next, we are interested to further study the effect of fluoxetine on E-cadherin mediated cell adhesion. So the recombinant E-cadherin chiremic protein was used in this study. First, we test the effect of E-cadherin chiremic protein on percentage of splitting cells. As you can see here, the percentage of spreading beta cells are highly increased after 6 or 9 hours of culture on E-cadherin chiramide coating slice. And also we can see here the fluoxetine decrease the percentage of spreading cells. And as we know, the F18 remodeling is required for insulin secretions. And as you can see here, the F18 expression is fully at the cell membranes, but the fluoxetine destroys the F18 structures. Study already demonstrates the cell calcium signaling is played important roles in multiple cellular functions, including the insulin secretion. And increase the intracellular calcium levels is required for the insulin secretions. The store-operated calcium entries is also important for insulin secretion in beta cells. What is the store-operated entries, calcium entries? Once the depletion of the calcium from the ER, they will activate the SOCE channel open and the calcium will influx. For the many steps is the STIM1 is the ER sensor proteins. Once the calcium depletion from the ER, the STIM1 will activate and form the oligomers, and then trafficking to the membranes and interaction with the ORI1. And once the STIM1 interaction with the ORI1, the SOCE channel will open and the calcium will influx into the cytosomes. So this is called the SOCE operated calcium entries and is important for the insulin secretions. So next, we further want to study whether the fluoxetine will impair intracellular calcium, mainly focusing on the ER release and SOCE activation. So as you can see here, the fluoxetine decrease the ER release and decrease the SOCE activation in the beta cells. As we know, the fluoxetine decrease the ER release and suppression the SOCE activations. So we further want to study whether the effect of SOCE activity on cell-cell adhesion. So as you can see here, after treat with the SOCE inhibitors, the percentage of spreading beta cell was decreased. As we know, the intracellular calcium level is important for the insulin secretions. So we further want to study whether intracellular calcium levels is important for cell-cell adhesion. So we use the inomyosin to raise the intracellular calcium levels. As you can see here, the fluoxetine is inhibit the beta cell spreadings, and the inomyosin is restores the beta cell spreadings, which was inhibited by fluoxetine. So after the in vitro study, we go to the in vivo study, and we use the mice to feed in with the standard child or high-fi diet charts. After 24 weeks, after 20 weeks, we treat the mouse with the fluoxetine, and after 1 month, we sacrifice the mice and taking the pictures. So as you can see here, the E-cadherin is fully expressing in intracellular portion of the islet cells, but the fluoxetine treating mice was observed the E-cadherin was decreased at intracellular of islet cells. So in our study, we demonstrated the fluoxetine reduced cell-cell adhesions, and the fluoxetine induced E-cadherin accumulates in the Golgi patient, and the fluoxetine reduced the cell surface expression of E-cadherin is due to increased E-cadherin endocytosis. And we also shows the fluoxetine suppress ER calcium release and SOCE activations. So this is my talk, and I want to thank my lab members, also my cooperation, and also the funding from the 科技部. So this is my talk. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chen, for her talk about the association with depression and issuing. Yeah, she just using the picture and image to disconstruct the mechanism. And the next speaker, yeah, Dr. Salva Pravina. Yeah, good. Yeah, she is a doctor from Pura, Malaysia, and she is one of the awardees. And then, yeah, this is a great honor to invite her come to talk about the urban environment pollution and its associated health risk in Malaysia. Let's welcome her.
Wonderful morning to Dr. Brundtland, Director Chang, and everyone here. It is a great pleasure for me to share a few of my research findings from Malaysia. So this is the research presentation outline for today. And basically, my research area is looking into environmental analysis and human health assessment, where we analyze various type of environmental samples by knowing the exposure, and we would like to know the risk of the exposure to human health. So far we have involved with various environmental samples, starting from beach water and soil. We have also involved with surface water, drinking water, urban soil and dust, and until grey water purification. We are also, starting from 2015, we are also looking into emerging contaminant. Emerging contaminant are pollutants that are present in environment at very low concentration, but not regularly monitored, but it has its own health risks to human health. So I'm sharing a few of my research findings. First, we involved with beach water, sand, and health risks, where we analyze E. coli colonies in beach water and soil, where the results turn out to be there were E. coli colonies detected in beach water and soil. The reason to this detection of E. coli colonies are due to leaking of sewage pipeline from hotel to middle of the sea, which made the E. coli to be detected in the place where people are doing their swimming activities. And the health risk indicated dermal symptoms to be the highest among the respondents after 1 to 2 weeks of being in contact with beach water, which is E. coli colonies. Second, we are moving on to drinking water quality and health risks. We conducted this research in Kelantan, Malaysia, which is northern part of Malaysia. This is because this area still uses galvanized pipeline, where most of Malaysian cities uses PVC pipeline. The long-term use of galvanized pipeline will result the heavy metals to leach from galvanized pipeline to drinking water and to residential area. The good news is the heavy metals are in below of permittable limit, and there is no health risk associated. Since 2015, we started to analyze emerging contaminant. In this case is steroid hormone in surface water. Langat River is located below of Kuala Lumpur, the capital city of Malaysia. And Langat River being used as the main raw water supply to various urban areas, including Kuala Lumpur. So the results indicated all the sampling location along the river, the locations where animal farming such as aquaculture and location that receives treated sewage water treatment tend to have steroid hormone, because steroid hormone being used widely in aquaculture sectors for growth promoter and widely in prostate and breast cancer treatments, which resulted steroid hormone to be detected in the location near where these sources are. Moving on, my research team and I also involved in development of low-cost water filter that uses cellulose paper, then we coat it with silver nanoparticle, and this antibacterial water filter can filter water by flow of gravity without the need of pump and electricity. So this is a picture from the worst flood in Malaysian history in 2015, where most of northern Malaysia and eastern Malaysia were flooded. During this flood, drinking water has been supplied through existing low-cost water purification system that uses electricity and pump, and also using bottled water. After several days, when the flood became worse, there is a disruption of electricity and the main roads are closed, which means the existing low-cost water filtration couldn't be operated, and the bottled water cannot be transported to the victims' houses. That resulted these victims did not receive clean drinking water for continuous 3 days. With that problem, we have invented a low-cost water filtration unit called Emerge water filter, where you place the antibacterial water filter in this position, and when we pour water, it can filter by flow of gravity, meaning to say no any additional energy required, and you can obtain this clean drinking water and you can straight away drink it without further boiling, which suits perfectly for emergency situation. And the performance of this antibacterial water filter works well for low turbid water, but for high turbid water, you need another pre-treatment to remove the turbid and refilter back with this antibacterial water filter, and the water is ready to be used. We have also conducted this water filtration unit training. These are all the flood victims in northern part of Malaysia. This is to teach them how this water filter works and to obtain their idea so that we can design the best ergonomic design for the low-cost water filter to be used in any emergency situation. Moving on, we have also involved with urban soil and dust, where we used in vitro digestion model. That's a human digestion that we mimic outside the lab. And we indicated that this is Rawang area, the first sample that we use in vitro digestion model. This is a cement factory that located in the middle of Rawang city. But to be frank, it's the cement factory that comes first to this area, and then the area developed to urban area. What happened is now the cement factory is the #1 contributor to dust pollution. So the results indicated there is a risk for non-carcinogenic risk and carcinogenic risk for Rawang area. Moreover, the results turn out to be, besides the cement factory, traffic emission also plays the major role for heavy metal deposition in the urban dust. Now we move on to Klang, Malaysia. This is the area that located besides Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia, where this area is the most highly urbanized area in Malaysia with various industrial development together with the worst traffic jam that you can observe in our country. So the results turn out to be, we use surface soil, urban soil, because urban soil is the best indicator to know the level of pollution because it accumulates pollutant in a longer time. The results indicated both of non-carcinogenic and carcinogenic were detected. So it meaning to say traffic emission again plays an important role here. We move on to marketed rice. For your information, there are many field rice samples were investigated in Malaysia. However, there's no single study to indicate the quality of rice that we eat every day. So we use the same in vitro digestion model, and as rice is a staple food for many Malaysians, you see the delicious dish here, okay? The results indicated there's no non-carcinogenic risk. However, there's a tendency to have carcinogenic risk in the rice that we eat every day. So it's a big question, and a second stage of research is going on. Where does these carcinogenic agents come from? Which our hypothesis, it should be from paddy soil. So moving on, this is last year's project where we analyzed microbeads pollution in personal care products. For your information, microbeads is actually an industrial term for microplastics in personal care product. So we conducted a huge questionnaire for all over Malaysia for us to identify top 10 products that has microbeads, in our term scrubs, in personal care products. So it turned out to be toothpaste and facial scrub were the most used products that has microbeads or microplastic, or in our term, scrubs. So these are examples of microbeads that present in one of the facial scrub exists in Malaysia. So these results indicated that a total of 0.199 trillion microbeads are expected to release to environment from wastewater in Malaysia. This is because the existing filter in wastewater treatment, the pores are bigger, and while the microbead size are smaller, so it can seep through the filter and ended up in environment. The most dangerous part is aquatic organisms like fish. They tend to mistaken microbeads which look similar with their food, and they will eat microbeads, and ended up microbeads being accumulated in fish, and you and me will eat the same fish for lunch and dinner today, and last, the microbeads are going to end up in our body. So I would like to take this platform and this opportunity to tell all the young ladies or even the boys, please stop using personal care products that has scrubs, which are microbeads. Let's go back like how our grandmother and mother did. Use natural scrub, which is more safer to your skin. All right, these are the ongoing projects, 3 ongoing projects right now, grey water purification, pharmaceutical, and low cost. For grey water purification, we are using the banana steam waste from agriculture converted to activated carbon. This is indirectly also in line with sustainable agriculture practice. Use their waste to a meaningful product. This activated carbon is used to purify grey water. Grey water is actually a water that comes from kitchen and washing machine. In our project, in the second stage of our project, we would like to design a product that contains this activated carbon, and this product can be plugged to any washing machine in our house because washing machine uses huge amount of water. So you can purify the washing machine water and you can reuse back the water. The treated grey water couldn't be used for drinking water, but you can reuse back the water for cleaning purposes. This is the second stage. For pharmaceutical residue in drinking water, it's very sad to say that many countries are started to detect pharmaceutical residue in their drinking water. This is due to improper medicine management and also incapability of wastewater treatment to remove pharmaceutical. So these are three main rivers that been used as an example because these rivers were the most supplying the most raw water supply to drinking water treatment. And sadly, even in raw water, pharmaceuticals were detected. The second stage of our project is we would like to see how much from pharmaceutical in raw water goes to drinking water and from drinking water goes to public. This is the the last ongoing project where we are, if you remember the first version, the design of low-cost water filter, we are remodifying for the second one. The improvements were made in terms of coating, amount of water filtered, and the design. We would like to have a flat design so it's easy to carry during disasters. These are the outputs so far. For all the research finding, and these are several of my achievements through the research finding and potential research collaboration. I'm looking for anyone who is interested for any potential collaboration, especially emerging contaminant. So I would like to acknowledge all my grant providers, nationally and internationally. It wouldn't be possible to conduct this project without them. And these are 5 female professors who has gave me a chance to join this university and department and for me to become a female scientist. And this is the only one male here who just happened to be my best friend since our postgraduate studies. So with that, this is the existing students and collaborators. A keynote message for you to go back, before you go back is, please stop using personal care products with scrubs. You are also contributing to microplastics pollution, which is going to be the most hottest topic in coming future. With that, thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Pravina, for the very interesting findings and the very clear take-home message to all of us here. So should we move on to the next speaker? Next, I would like to invite, another Professor Chen, Professor Chen Rongzhen, and she's with the Food Safety and also the Hygiene and Risk Management Department. And she's also going to share with us her experiences and the research findings. So should we have big hands for her and to have her talk, and after that we will have the floor open for the discussions.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here today. And I'm going to talk about my research about chemopreventive effects of pterostabine against environmental toxicants-induced carcinogenesis. And I'm the assistant professor of Department of Food Safety and Hygiene and Risk Management. Thank you. And my research fields include 2 parts. The major part is the carcinogenesis induced by environmental toxicants. And these toxicants include nicotine, NNK, and irritant. And these are also toxicants existed in tobacco smoke. I've been studying the apoptosis, autophagy, and chemoresistance of these mechanisms. And the second part is the chemopreventive effects of natural products such as pterostabine. And I've been studying how pterostabine against carcinogenesis induced by these toxicants. It is known that carcinogenesis can be induced by exposure to environmental toxicants, radiation, or virus infections. And tobacco smoke is the major risk factor for carcinogenesis. And there are more than 4,000 chemicals in the tobacco smoke, and at least 60 of them are well-known carcinogens. The most important carcinogen in tobacco smoke is NNK, which is the DNA damage agent that induces cell death. And the other component, nicotine, is the addictive component in tobacco smoke, and that is also induced carcinogenesis through many mechanisms. And NNK is the most potent carcinogen in tobacco smoke, and that is formed by nitration of nicotine during the curing or the smoking process. And the biological effects of nicotine and NNK are mediated by binding to nicotinic acetylcholine receptors or beta-adrenergic receptors, leading to tumor progression. However, many mechanisms of nicotine and NNK in carcinogenesis are still not fully understood. Therefore, in my previous studies, I have found that T24 bladder cancer cells transient exposure to nicotine induce the activation of ERK1, 2, and stage 3 by alpha-7 and alpha-4 beta-2 nicotinic receptors, leading to cell cycle progression. And T24 cells were then long-term treated with nicotine to mimic the real exposure of cancer patients who had been long-term exposed to tobacco smoke. And the result indicated that long-term exposure to nicotine induced apoptosis inhibition and chemoresistance in bladder cancer cells after treated with anti-cancer drugs, Taxol or cisplatin. That means the cancer patients who are also continuous smokers may acquire resistance to chemotherapeutic agents. Therefore, I've tried to find a solution to suppress chemoresistance induced by nicotine. And previous studies suggest that the phytochemicals are good chemopreventive agents to block, suppress, or inhibit all stages of carcinogenesis. And epidemiological studies also supported that eating lots of plain food rich in phytochemicals may help to prevent cancer. Therefore, I have surveyed some natural products from resveratrol. And I have found that pterostilbene is an effective natural product to prevent cancer. Pterostilbene can be found in blueberries and cranberries or grapes. And pterostilbene has 2 methyl-C groups instead of hydroxy groups. That makes pterostilbene more lipophilicity, higher bioavailability, longer half-life, and better effects than resveratrol. And the chemopreventive effects of pterostilbene induce anti-inflammation, anti-oxidative traits, apoptosis-inducing effects, and cell cycle arrest. In addition, my study is also the first one to reveal that pterostilbene can induce autophagy in cancer cells, and that is the most important mechanisms of pterostilbene. And as shown in this figure, I have found that autophagosomes are increased after treated with pterostilbene in both sensitive and resistant cancer cell lines. And autophagosome can be detected by electron microscopy or fluorescence staining. And the result also show that the autophagy marker LC32 is also increased after treated with pterostilbene in a dose-dependent manner. And the autophagy mechanism induced by pterostilbene is mediated by ERK activation and inhibition of PI3 kinase AKT pathway. In addition, pterostilbene also induces necrosis, apoptosis, or cell cycle arrest, leading to cell growth arrest and cell death in bladder cancer cells. And the results show that pterostilbene is also effective in the treatment of chemoresistant cancer cells. And the other chemopreventive effects of pterostilbene was evaluated in AJ mice treated with irricin. Irricin is a lung cancer carcinogen that is also existed in tobacco smoke and in some fermented foods. And after treated with irricin, lung tumor genesis were increased. However, in combination with pterostilbene, reduced the tumor numbers and tumor volumes. This indicates pterostilbene is also a promising effect in lung tumor to prevent lung tumor genesis. And it is also implicated that EGFR and its downstream signalings are important in regulation lung tumorigenesis. And after treated with torostobin, the expression of EGFR and its downstream signalings, AKT, mTOR, and ERK, are also decreased. And from the immunohistochemistry studies, the results show that torostobin increased the expression of autophagy marker LC32. In addition, torostobin also increased the expression of caspase-3. The result indicated that torostobin can prevent lung tumorigenesis induced by erythrin through autophagy and apoptosis induction. In 2016, Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to Dr. Yoshinori Osumi for his works in autophagy. From his works, many autophagy-related genes are identified and the function were studied. In healthy cells, autophagy is a protective signal to respond to many stresses such as irradiation, starvation, oxidative stress, or accumulation of misfolded proteins. In contrast, persistent and excessive autophagy can induce cell death after treated with anti-cancer therapies. And deregulation of autophagy has also been found in many diseases such as cancer, neurodegenerative disorders, heart disease, or infectious diseases. Therefore, modulation of autophagy by inhibitors or inducers could be an attractive strategy against many cancers. And therefore, as I mentioned previously, I found that torostobin is an autophagy inducer. So I have been studying the preventive effects of torostobin on urate nephropathy and skin damage induced by other toxicants through its autophagy-induced mechanisms. In addition, my previous study also found that torostobin can induce another chemopreventive mechanism called senescence in lung cancer cells. As shown in this figure, torostobin at lower concentration is sufficient to induce senescence in lung cancer cells, and the senescent cells with positive beta-gale activities can be stained in blue colors, especially in p53 positive cancer cells. Senescence is a specific cell type that the cell's loss of ability to proliferate in response to DNA damage, oxidative stress, or telomere shortening. And pro-senescence therapy has been an attractive chemotherapeutic strategy because the senescent cells can be destroyed by immune system. In addition, senescence can be achieved at far lower concentrations of drugs than those required to induce apoptosis. Therefore, pro-senescence therapy can reduce the adverse effects of cancer therapy. As I mentioned earlier, senescence can be induced by telomere shortening. Telomere is a repeated DNA sequence that composed with protein component that can function as a protective structure of chromosome. And during the cellular division, telomeres become progressively shortened and trigger cell death. But telomere can be stabilized by telomerase, which is the component of an RNA subunit and a protein component called TERT. TERT is the major catalytic subunit of telomerase and is overexpressed in more than 80% of cancers. And inhibition of telomerase or TERT inhibition could induce senescence and apoptosis in cancer cells. Therefore, pro-senescence therapy is also a promising therapeutic target for cancer therapy. As I mentioned, and I have found that torostobin can reduce the the activity of telomerase. And pterostabine also inhibits the expression of TERT in lung cancer cells. And these results lead to induced DNA damage signal, leading to ATM activation, P24 expression, and S-phase arrest. In addition, P53 were also activation. And P53 activation positively feedback provoked the inhibition of TERT expression. Therefore, my results show that pterostabine inhibits telomerase activity and protein expression in lung cancer cells that is largely mediated by P53-mediated pathways. To summarize, in my previous studies, I have found the carcinogenesis mechanisms induced by environmental toxicant nicotine or uricin that are also toxicants in tobacco smoke. And it is inevitable that people are exposed to environmental toxicants often. So it is widely needed to evaluate chemopreventive strategy against carcinogenesis. And phytochemicals are attractive because they are accessibility in diets and low cost and low toxicity to human. And from my current studies, I have been proved that pterostabine is an attractive chemopreventive agent against carcinogenesis induced by nicotine or uricin. And through cell cycle arrest, apoptosis, autophagy, and senescence pathways. This indicates pterostabine is a promising therapeutic chemopreventive agent, and its safety and more detailed mechanisms are worthy for further studies. And this is what I told today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Yeah, today we have 3 Dr. Chen. Yeah, and later we would like to take a question, and we have a question and answer section. So I would like to invite 4 presenters come over here. Yeah. We don't put on the stage because we want to close to audience. Yeah, and then we will try to collect questions. So please, 4 presenters, 3 Dr. Chen and Salva, please come. As well? Okay. Yeah, sure. So any question? Okay, please. Can you briefly introduce yourself and also the question, the person you want to ask?
Okay, thank you. My name is Arsanto from Indonesia, and I have a question for the first presenter. Does the species on the move, because climate change, affect the species which move naturally? I mean, like birds, it have migration, and your species at the your topic, does the birds, maybe birds feed birds food, so does it affect it? And the second question is for Mrs. Sarwa. For the banana filter, how is the productivity for the filtering oil? Thank you.
Okay, so may I quickly make sure that I get your question correct? You are asking about the migratory bird?
Just for the, does the species on the move,
yes,
that your topic of research, affected the species which move naturally, which may be migration, natural migration?
Yes.
Affect or not?
Yes, of course, but they are through different processes because the migratory birds, they need some specific resource during their migratory. And that kind of resource could be changing due to climate change. So that means they maybe make their migratory even more difficult. And another thing is about the timing of their migration, because they are actually receiving certain queue to migrate. And this kind of queue are often changed due to climate change. So that will another effect.
Is it okay if you repeat the question?
Okay. I interest with the banana filter from activated carbon, because when he come back to the household, it will be useful. How the productivity, maybe the percentage of the decreasing of the oil contaminant from the gray water to the water that we can use for the cleaning.
Okay, thank you for the question. For kitchen waste that contains oil, the ongoing project shows that the oil tends to cover the activated carbon, so the performance decrease. So what we are doing now is we are coming up another material upper part of the activated carbon, so that first free filter will absorb the oil or remove the oil first before the remaining kitchen waste goes to activated carbon. So we are testing several materials, but all the materials that we have tested are not to the level that we want. So it's still a question mark in terms of oil removal.
Thank you. Because in my country, we try to absorb the oil from durian waste. Yeah, maybe you can check.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And any other question from younger generation? All of you are hungry. Any question or upstairs? Any question?
I've got a question to Professor Chen Yijing, Chen Laoshi, because you showed that what you found is not adequately considered yet, and you also suggested some kind of, like, for example, monitoring programs and other actions should be taken. So what would be your thoughts that we can have this, what you suggested, really taken into account in our policy, or just like our people's action? Do you have any suggestion how we can promote that?
Well, thank you very much. That's actually a very big question. And in fact, there are many different action has been done, considered, or ongoing process being considered depending on different topics. So I can give some example. So for example, thinking about conservation, that I'm most comfortable to talk about, that we're usually thinking about having a national park or preserved area to conserve the species. But actually, as I mentioned, that's a geographically fixed area, but the species are moving. So that means maybe 10 years later or 20 years later, they are no longer here, or they are moving to other place. So having that kind of national park or conserved area is important, but we actually need more active and more adaptive work to preserve that species on the move. So that means that we actually need to more active actions throughout all the landscape to kind of create a more transferable landscape like that.
Any student, junior high school, have question, you can ask in Chinese, and we do translation. Okay, good. Please.
Hello, I want to ask a question to the third speaker about the the microbeads thing. So is there possible that we can do a sort of like a filtering device from like the maybe the shower rooms of like houses to possibly like filter these microbeads and prevent them from getting into the environment? Is this the kind of device a possible idea?
Yes, it is possible to come up with that filter. For your information, existing filter that we have is micrometer size. Microbeads are in nanometer. So it is still possible to filter the microbeads if the filter is lesser size than the microbeads are. But however, for the disposal of microbeads, which happen to be microplastic, is another issue in future. This is two different problems to tackle for microbeads, to filter and for disposal. Okay.
Okay, so the last question. We only have 3 minutes left. Any further question? Okay, good. Yeah, lovely.
Hello, my name is Joanna and I'm from Shen Kong Girls High School. I have a question for the third speaker. The question is that how do the people in need have the exact access to get the water filter when they need clean water? Because like the financial support and the exact access is nearly impossible for everyone to get it. So this is my question, like how do they get the water filter?
You mean the flood victims, the disaster victims, or the normal?
The normal one.
How do they?
How could people in need get the water filter?
Oh, that water filter. Okay, I got that. Okay, all right. So for that water filter, we have commercialized the water filter. There is this non-governmental organization, NGO, who is helping us to sell the product. It's in universities' shop that they advertise and for the public to buy. But most of the public people who is not staying in near disaster areas, for them, this water filter is nothing. But what happened is when this NGO brought these filters to disaster areas, the flood victims that you saw just now, the NGO sponsored the low-cost water filter to them. It's free for flood because we have managed to raise funds to give them for free. But for public, they have to buy. I think it's about 15 Taiwan and
dollars.
$dollars, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Taiwan dollars.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, before closing the section, I would like to ask each of you, can you give us advice from your expertise or from professional how to make our global sustainable based on your research? Give only one advice, and that's our take-home message. Okay? Yeah, it's a question. Yeah, start from you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I mentioned in probably the last slide that we need a lot of work, especially the monitoring program, so that we know what is going on Earth now, and everything's changing quickly. So that actually involves a very important work that we call the citizen science. So that means everybody can participate in that kind of monitoring or whatever job to know and to understand our nature better. So I hope that for those younger generations, that you can participate in any kind of citizen science project to monitor, to help to look after our Earth. Okay, thank you.
And a lot of study demonstrates the metabolic disorder is associated with the mood disorders. So it means like people have a depression is easy to have a risk of the develop diabetes. So it means diabetes is associated with the depressions. So the take-home message is, I think it's like eat health and be health.
Health and be happy.
In my study, I mentioned that tobacco smoke is the major risk for cancer. And it is estimated that about 1 billion smokers recently. So the tobacco smoke induced adverse healthy problem is remain the concerned issue worldwide. So I would suggest that we should reduce the tobacco smoke consumption, and in contrast, because people exposed to pollution every day, so it is helpful to take healthy foods such as phytochemical-rich food to reduce the adverse healthy problem. Thank you.
Sarah.
Okay, I think mine was clear just now. It's important, every single of us, even our action is so small, but the impact of you are doing a very good impact for microplastics pollution to environment. So please, the next time you want to go buy facial scrubs or toothpaste with scrubs, think twice, because you are contributing to microplastics in your own way. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for your participation. And then thank you for 4 speakers. Please give hands to them. Thank you. So let's close the symposium, and then we will have a lunch break. Okay. Okay, so you had lunch box over outside, so pick up the lunch box, and then we are going to have a continuing panel section. Yeah. Okay.